do your best to be concise. And we ask that you make your point in 3 minutes or less. And if for some reason we have many speakers on a single topic, we reserve the right to limit comments to 1 minute if needed. Thank you all for joining us today.
Okay, thank you, Justin. I'll now go ahead and lead us in our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land we now call California is the ancestral land of over 109 nations, tribes, and peoples. The indigenous peoples of this area have a deep and reciprocal relationship with the land as its original stewards. Their ways, methods, and traditions have contributed to California's rich biodiversity and have impacted the transportation network for the state. We stand with Indigenous communities and are committed to partnering and advocating for a more equitable and sustainable future. Our transportation network not only connects us to families, friends, work, and leisure, it connects us to our past and future. We embrace our past with a future commitment to inclusiveness and equity for everyone who calls the state home. We'll now take public comment for items not on the agenda. Clerk, is there anyone looking to make public comment?
Thank you, Camille. I do not see any requests at this time to comment.
Great, thank you. That will now lead us into the election of a subcommittee chair. So with the creation of these subcommittees, there's now an opportunity for additional EAC members to take on a leadership role if wanted. And just for a quick rundown. Oh, Martha?
I just wanted to go ahead and nominate Ana Gonzalez for the chair.
Thank you so much, Martha. Let me go ahead and finish running through just a little bit of background so other people can have a chance, but we will note down that nomination. So a subcommittee chair would be responsible for facilitating subcommittee meetings and working with staff on developing meeting agendas, and also reporting out at each full EAC meeting on the activities of the subcommittee and introducing any recommendations or actions that that subcommittee would like the full EAC to consider. So as this is the first meeting, we'd like to provide folks with the opportunity to nominate themselves or a colleague to serve as chair of the subcommittee, and we already have a nomination for Ana. Is there anyone else that would like to submit a nomination?
This is Andres. I just want to second that nomination for Ana.
Okay, Andres seconds for Ana. Anyone else? Oh, Carolyn?
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted, as an administrative detail, Martha, since you're an ex officio member of this subcommittee, unfortunately, I don't think you can make a motion. However, if somebody else wants to make that motion and then second it, we can still take the nomination.
I give that motion. This is Carrie Akemi Hernandez.
Okay, so Perry is nominating Ana. Do we have a second?
This is Andres. I'll second that.
Andre seconds. Sasha, do you have anything to add?
I know, sorry, I was going to say what Carolyn said.
Oh, good. Okay, if we don't have any more nominations at this time, we can go ahead and move into voting. So is there any discussion before?
Yes, this is Peggy. I would like to know if Ana accepts the nomination, and if so, what she might want to say before we vote.
Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you so much, Peggy. So thank you y'all for the nomination. I do accept it. I know this is one of my priority subcommittees, so I appreciate the support and I hope to do a good job with the team. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Clerk, is there any public comment before we move into voting?
Not seeing any request to comment from the public at this time.
Okay, clerk, can you please conduct a roll call vote?
Yes, will do. Thank you. Carrie Akimi Hernandez,
Yes.
Lisa Marie Alvarado, David Acevedo,
Yes.
Ana Gonzalez,
Aye.
Peggy Martinez,
Yes.
Andres Ramirez,
Yes.
Michelle Rousey,
Abstain.
Randy Torres Van Vleck,
Yes.
Howard Wong.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Great, congratulations to Anna for being the new chair of the Transportation Planning and Program Guidance Subcommittee. And with that, we'll now move into the presentation if there's nothing else. Martha, I see your hand is up. Was that left up from your earlier comment? Okay, great. Yeah, we can now move into the presentation.
Thanks. Good morning, folks. My name is, or Allison, are you introducing or?
You're more than welcome to introduce yourself. You're here. But I just want to I'm here as well. So, why don't I just do a quick intro? That's fine. So for the subcommittee, one of the priorities that had come about in I believe the May EAC committee was around transit and the Transit Transformation Task Force is definitely one that is happening, is a very current event that's happening as we speak. And Hunter has been one of the primary leads for this work, as well as with Chad. Sorry, my brain and my computer are both blanking. Chad in our office. So Hunter is the senior advisor for transit mobility data, Chad Edison, senior advisor for transit mobility data and performance at agency. He was recently with Caltrans working in similar roles, and we brought him into the agency to help support the not just this task force, but implementation of it, as well as other data-driven efforts. I'm going to let Hunter take the lead and describe more about the task force, its structure for those of you who aren't aware, as well as kind of some of the current steps of the task force and what that will lead to later this fall. So with that, I'm just going to pass it on to Hunter.
Thank you so much, Allison, and good morning, members of the Interagency Equity Advisory Committee, Transportation Planning and Program Guidance Subcommittee. As Allison mentioned, my name is Hunter Owens here at Cal STA. Just to confirm, can folks see the screen with the presentation pulled up? Great. Just to kind of level set, want to start with.
I'm sorry, Hunter, this is
Yeah.
Peggy. I just wanted to let you know that I am sight impaired and cannot see the screen, and maybe you know that, and maybe you're going to describe stuff as you go, but I figured I may as well get it out there in case you didn't know. So there you have it. Thank you very much. I will mute.
No worries. Thank you so much for that heads up,
For
Peggy. I
sure.
will be running through what is visible on the slides
Cool.
as well in
Thank
my oral comments, not written comments. Where we are, how did SB 125 and the Transit Transformation Task Force get started? As we know, transit is really critical to California's climate and equity goals. Yet we've been in a situation where ridership has been declining, even since before the pandemic. On the right on the screen, you can see a graph from the UCLA Institute of Transportation Studies. In California, we saw about a 10% decline in ridership from 2008 to 2018. Since the pandemic, depending on the system, we've seen ridership recoveries to that 2019 baseline of pre-pandemic ridership that is, anywhere from 50 to 110, 120%, depending on the agency. SB 125, which was the budget trailer bill of last year of 2024, excuse me, provided short-term funding for transit agencies as they continued to recover through the pandemic. That was one half of SB 125. The other half of SB 125 was the establishment of the Transit Transformation Task Force with a goal of growing transit ridership, improving the transit experience, and addressing long-term operational needs. I would say transformation has been a real key goal at the task force. Our goal is not merely to get back to, pre-COVID ridership, as the slide indicated on the right. Pre-COVID ridership isn't even our all-time peak ridership. But really, looking at like what it will take to have us meet our goals, such as, reducing VMT by 30% by 2045, as outlined in the CARB scoping plan. Our report to the legislature is due in October of 2025, so we are rounding the bend. The Transit Transformation Task Force is not a standing body. We are the whole task force is going to be here to produce this report, and then, it will go on to the legislature, the administration, and agencies for implementation. The task force is really focused on a level of trains that is transformational for transit riders across the state. So, again, we want to go from these incremental goals to transformational goals, and what are the policies, funding, and outcomes needed to achieve that? So thinking, how do we go from achieving our pre-COVID ridership to how does transit become the mode of choice for everyone? How do we grow transit ridership year over year to what would it take to serve the majority of trips in urbanized areas via transit? How can we collectively collaborate differently to best support the customer, given our current assets and future investments, making sure that we are very customer centric? And what shifts in operations and availability will need to be could be made to increase service at a real large level? Want to touch on the structure of the task force. Over the task force has been meeting since December of 2023. It is a 25-member task force. We have representation from state agencies, regional and local agencies, both planning agencies and transit agencies. Representation from our state assembly and senate, in that we have the principal consultants from both the assembly and senate transportation committees. We have transit agency representation, advocacy groups, unions, and academia. Obviously, the task force really directs the overall effort. It makes the recommendation based on our analysis and staff reports, and then they obviously review and sign off on the final report. As much as I love our 25 task force members, they are very busy people. We also want to make sure that we're getting a wide degree of depth and breadth of experience. So we have two other types of groups we've convened to help us get this report to make sure it reflects outreach and the needs of all of us across California. So the technical working group has been a 13-member group representing, sort of state, regional, and local agencies, transit agencies, and a small bit of advocacy group, really focused on some of the technical implementation details. I want to thank, I saw David Acevedo here. David has been serving on the TWG, so I really want to thank him for his participation on that. Really provides deep technical expertise on particular subjects and supports the data analysis and content ahead of our Transit Transformation Task Force meetings. And they have been providing feedback and recommendations to our draft and on our preliminary final report. And then finally, we've been conducting subject matter we've been convening subject matter experts to conduct subject matter expert interviews. These have been very much on an individual topic level basis. These are in-depth one-on-one interviews to kind of get what policy reforms and recommendations might be necessary in the years ahead to implement some of the goals of the TTTF. So looking at our 2025 work plan, we are entering we've approved a draft outline of the report. I'll be going into detail on what is going to be in the report as we continue on with this presentation. We are actively preparing the report, and we have now actually released the first tranche of the report. And this is all in a goal of we're going to have 3 tranches, and that final report is going to be released in October at the end of the year. So thinking about that final report and then that outline, we've sort of structured it around 3 sort of units of work. So the first is principles. We only have 4 principles. Those are really the value statements that guide the report, and they group our strategies and recommendations. Our strategies are particular, broader issue areas that can have a specific, here's what we think should be done to move the needle on a particular topic or set of topics. And then finally, the policy recommendations, which are the most specific, that's the bottom of the pyramid, really builds us up to the overall report. I want to touch on some of our statutorily required topics. So on the right here, you can see some of the topics that this SB 125 statute requires us to cover. This includes fair coordination and integration, coordinated scheduling, safety and cleanliness, transit prioritization, first and last mile access, fleet and asset management, land use and housing, workforce recruitment, retention and development, Transportation Development Act reform, what California state agencies do oversight, various revenue sources for new funding, and value capture. A short list, and that did not even touch on all the topics that our task force has asked us to look into, including such items as capital costs, construction cost reform, and accessible transportation and the transportation needs of older adults. So just to kind of look at how the operating model has been working, and the structure, again, has been, per the guidance and what we've had in the requirements from the TTTF, do the initial analysis and draft context. Then we bring in our subject matter expertise from the TTTF, TWG, and others. We then iterate on that, and we've been having several cycles of this, and then that has really led to the creation of the TTTF report as we've gone through those proposed recommendations and passed them or not, or modified them at the TTTF. As I mentioned earlier, I was going to tell you what is actually in this report. We have an approved draft outline from our TTTF report that was approved back in the spring. So our first section is sort of context. Why do we need to transform transit? You're sort of what will this do for California? Then we move into the bulk of the report, which is our guiding principles. Those 4 principles are better service, better outcomes, transit and land use are interconnected, safety is fundamental, and transit should be operationally sustainable. All of the topics in SB 125 Section 1F, which I talked about in the previous slide, are inside those principles. We then have 2 large appendices that are coming done. One is a detailed analysis of a number of topics that was requested by the legislature in SB 25 Section 1E. Unlike the Section 1F, which is topics where they've asked for recommendation, Section 1E is topics where they've really asked for a sort of finding, how much money is used on some particular issue, what would be these, just sort of more of a fact base rather than asking for recommendations from the task force. So that's in Appendix A. And then Appendix B will be a detailed table of all of our strategies and recommendations. So again, where have recommendations come from? We've been preparing staff reports here at CalSTA based on the discussions that we've had in the TTTF, our SME interviews, and the TWG inputs. And we also have a process for TTTF members to directly suggest recommendations. Those individual proposals have been voted on, and those are then put into the final report, which itself is then voted on in those 3 tranches. So to kind of go into the roadmap, last week we were supposed to have our first tranche, which includes our executive summary, some of the guidance and principles. That meeting is going to be rescheduled. I will make sure that we update update this group when we have a rescheduled date, and that will obviously be available as well on the Cal STA website. We then will have our next meeting with our second tranche coming out on August 1st. So that's our next meeting. That will be at the BART boardroom in Oakland, California. And then we'll be rescheduling that meeting, but also we will have our third and final of the tranches will be coming out on September 30th at SACOG. This should give us really ample time to collect public feedback, agency feedback, member feedback for each of these tranches rather than releasing it in one big, here's the entire, large report. We're kind of dividing it into sections. And then this should all allow us to release this report in its totality and finality to the legislature before October 31st, which is our statutory deadline. So, in our June meeting, obviously it's been postponed, but we have a vision statement that we are bringing as a staff recommendation. Task force will be able to modify this or change this, but our vision statement is, public transit is the backbone of a prosperous, affordable, climate resilient, and equitable California, empowering every Californian to move freely, reliably, and sustainably. We also have some new guiding principles that are in draft format. They are boost the speed, frequency, and reliability of transit services, increase the options for living, working, and learning near high-quality transit routes, deliver an exceptional customer experience with a strong focus on safety for all, and ensure transit is operationally and financially sustainable with consistent investment. Excuse me. Our focus area for the task force meeting that was postponed, that was going to be last week's, but will be coming up in our rescheduled meeting, will be boosting the speed, frequency, and reliability of transit services, including our topic area of transit prioritization, including how to standardize, support, and scale transit priority infrastructure, expedite the delivery of transit supportive infrastructure and strategies, coordinate and collaborate to deliver infrastructure across jurisdictions, and establishing flexibility within state funding sources. We also are tackling first and last mile access to transit as a topic area with 3 strategies in that area: reforming the planning process to improve access to transit, ensure consistent and flexible funding for active transportation and first and last mile for access for transit, and coordinate and collaborate to provide first and last mile access to transit across jurisdictions. We are also bringing our focus area and principle of delivering an exceptional customer experience with a strong focus on safety for all. This will include a safe and clean environment for passengers and operators, including implementing physical security measures for frontline transit workers and riders, improving coordinations with health and human service agencies, ensuring coordination at the state level between agencies, and providing some dedicated safety and security funding as a recommendation. And then we also have accessible transportation and the transportation needs of older adults and persons with disabilities. We have 5 strategies in that area. The first is coordinate paratransit services efficiently between transit agencies and across nonprofit, private, and healthcare providers. Developing a strategy of developing customer-facing and back-end tools to improve the process of booking and dispatching of paratransit rides. Improving the accessibility of all transit stops for all riders, reforming the planning process for paratransit to ensure better outcomes, and exploring the options to improve funding mechanisms for paratransit. We'll also be tackling the detailed analysis requested under Senate Bill 125. This includes, services provided and demographics of transit riderships, existing funding sources for transit with the funding available for capital and operations, the use of money from local transportation funds to fund other modes, such as local streets and roads, the cost to operate, maintain, and provide for the future growth of transit systems within the next 10 years, the costs and operational impacts associated with various state, federal, and local mandates, including not limited to the Americans with Disabilities Act and the State Air Resources Board Innovative Clean Transit Regulation, workforce recruitment, retention, development challenges that impact transit service, existing policies on state and local metrics to improve transit performance, information on how transit agencies modified their services in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and resulting drop in ridership and therefore revenue, and the division of transit funding between capital and operations. With that, I will close and can take questions. I don't know if we have a public. I will defer to the clerk on if there a public comment period is necessary.
Great, thank you, Hunter. Just to answer that question, we did not have any requests from the public, but I do know some of our members are requesting to comment at this time.
I'm happy to kind of facilitate some of that. I'm trying to look at find the view that is not the screen share. 1 second. But it looks like we have several. The first hand that I saw go up was subcommittee member Azevedo. David?
Sure, not sure. Do we want to switch back to the Brady Bunch view?
Yeah,
we see everyone?
yeah, we may need to see the slides because there was a lot of text on it. So if there are any questions, I'd say Hunter, just stay prepared to maybe refer to some of that. But I think I saw David and then I saw Subcommittee Chair Gonzalez and Michelle Rousey. So we'll go in that order and then we'll pick up the other hands as we go. That's okay.
Great. Well, I just want to first thank Hunter and Allison for joining us and for presenting this update on the transformation TTTF. We're not going to try to remember all the T's. And then to make it even more confusing, thank you so much, Hunter, for referencing the technical working group. It's been a real great experience working with that group. I know I was one of the very few advocates on that technical working group providing recommendations, and I'm really glad that recently, although we've been reading for, I think, over a year, we finally had some good conversations on the accessible transportation prioritizations and conversations, and that were included in the legislation that asked the TTTF to analyze. I just want to really quickly kind of raise, I think, what's important for this group. So Hunter and Allison, and I think Allison knows this, but maybe not Hunter, but one of the reasons why AARP was very interested in joining this was raising age as an equity consideration in transportation, given that 1 in 4 Californians will be over the age of 60 in just 5 quick years. And I thought that was really interesting, the bit in your Appendix A, which I'm not sure has been shared with this subcommittee, but I think may be of interest to many subcommittee members. That in Appendix A, I think you had this as the result of several conversations with subject matter experts like myself and a couple others. But I thought the quote that I wanted to just reference here and then ask a question on in Appendix A is this quote that, quote, paratransit ridership fell during COVID-19, but has since rebounded to nearly 13 million riders per year. This is closer to pre-pandemic levels than ridership on fixed route services. The segment of the California population that uses these paratransit services has grown faster than the population at large, which tracks with a lot of research AARP has done, and also tracks with research that the Master Plan for Aging is based off of. So I guess my question, Hunter, you mentioned that in the final TTTF report that you're looking to finalize by this fall, that things like accessible transportation, I just want to just make sure I'm hearing this right, may not be included in the recommendation portion in that interpretation of the bill language. But given that, like this appendix conclusion says, you have more riders closer to pre-pandemic on accessible transportation than fixed route, showing that this is a major priority. I would hope to hear some recommendations on how we can encourage this, especially since you do have more success in this mode of transportation and how this is a priority population as our state ages.
Yeah, 100%. And just to state it loud and clear, we will have, at the direction of the task force, recommendations on paratransit, accessible transportation, and the transportation needs of older adults. If I didn't get that topic 100% right in my quote, it is in there and is in fact part of the Tranche 1 recommendations that were going to be up for review last week and now will be up for review in the scheduled meeting. to clarify, that topic was not necessarily one that was required by statute for us to have recommendations on, but we do, as the task force does have the ability to add recommendations on topics that were not explicitly called out by the legislature. And that was one of the topics that we have, based on a lot of feedback from many groups, yourself included, David, wanted to make sure we hit in the task force. So that will be part of the Tranche 1 recommendations that are going forward at the next available juncture, and we're supposed to go forward last week.
Really great to hear. Thank you so much, Hunter.
Chair Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you. This is Ana Gonzalez. So, thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you for acknowledging that land use and transit are interconnected, especially when it comes to zoning for housing and job opportunities. I know that that's always a debate at the local level. So I'm glad that, you know, this is in part of this work. But I'm wondering right now, who makes the decisions to appoint the task force members, and will EAC members be allowed in those meetings?
So the task force appointees are decided on by the CalSTA secretary per the legislation. And obviously our meetings are welcome and open to all. And we've been doing extensive outreach to not just include just the statutorily appointed task force meetings, task force members, but also adding in additional groups such as our technical working group, where we've had David involved, and our subject matter expert interview process, where we've been interviewing a number of very large, I think we're over 100 now, experts on particular subjects within transportation. So.
Okay, so to follow up, has there been any discussions of maybe including an EAC member to be part of the task force?
You know what, I would not, the task force membership was set at the opening of the task force, which I was not present for. So that membership has been set for a while, as the TTTF itself. But again, we've been doing extensive engagement with not just the task force, but also all of the different groups and outreach in the subject matter expert process.
Thank you. And one more question. When it comes to transit prioritization, do you guys like communicate with the local agencies to sort of follow the recommendations of the task force, or do they have their own task force that they have to follow?
So our recommendations are sort of addressed at the sort of three, and you'll see if you look at some of the appendixes and drafts, you'll see we address where who is the recommendation targeted to. So the task force has we have one statutory power, which is to write a report. This is not power to implement those recommendations or do any particular action or activity. So sometimes the report will say something like the legislature should consider action X, action Y. Sometimes it says, you know, Caltrans could do something like create one of them is that Caltrans should create should not require an encroachment permit for the installation of bus shelters with full drawings, because this means that it's very hard for local agencies. This is actually one thing that we heard directly from local agency experts, that's extremely difficult to put transit bus shelters that are transit bus shelters on state right of way, because they have to do a full encroachment permit where they're drawing up, you know, extremely detailed plans that have an engineer stamp them for what is at its end, you know, a shade structure and a bench. And they often don't have the resources to do that. So having those standard plans could be a real way to expedite and encourage the delivery of that infrastructure. With that, we have some recommendations addressed at local agencies, but the scope of this task force is very much designed at giving recommendations for the legislature, the administration, and Caltrans, CalSTA to consider, more so than any individual local agency. I will also point out, just as we've been doing outreach and engagement with you know, some members of the EAC and, you know, subject matter experts, From this community, local agencies have been a real key part of this task force, including representation at the task force level, but also within the SME process to really figure out how we can better deliver transit priority infrastructure across the state. And there are certainly recommendations where local agencies could consider them, but at the end of the day, that's up for the local agency to decide how to take those. We're really focused on making sure we're delivering what is necessary for the state to do, especially looking at that lens of administrative and legislative changes that often really unlock things for local agencies that they want that could help them deliver these types of projects. That makes sense?
Yes, thank you.
I appreciate that. I'm just gonna kind of chime in a little bit, Hunter. The biggest challenge of doing a statewide strategy is that you've got lots of locals who have very different experiences and perspectives. And I think Hunter and the agency and the task force facilitation has been really good at trying to address all of those things. On top of that, you have seen and heard the laundry list, which feels like a laundry list to me. Just being an outsider to most of this, of things that need to be covered by the task force, and so I'm appreciative of some of that. To the committee here, thinking about how those different components can be considered from your lenses is really important. So appreciate, Anna, you're raising that in terms of local implementation in your area or elsewhere and for the communities you serve. So just wanted to make sure that we elevate that and really acknowledge that in the conversations. And then to the point of the meetings and participation, I think that we are hoping to at least make public comment more robust and helping to have more voices as these recommendations are being finalized over the next few months. And part of the reason we are bringing this to you. In terms of hands up, I have Michelle and Howard and then Peggy after that, if that's okay.
Hi guys, I'm Michelle Rousey. I appreciate your report. There's a lot I can say, and my biggest thing is how paratransit and bus services are acquired and the barriers around providing the service to people who are just outside of that 3/4 of a mile of access for that paratransit service. I'm hearing of consumers having to walk 1 or 2 blocks to be able to access their services because they're just outside of that barrier. And this is door-to-door paratransit services. They qualify under it for door-to-door service. So them walking a few blocks is like ridiculous. I'm wondering how much input you guys are getting from the people who are the end users of these services. I get that you've reached out to people who specialize in that and things like that. But the last 2 days, I spent 2 days at a conference for accessible futures and sharing listening and learning about people's needs around transit, housing, the environment and things like this for our disabled communities. And I'm wondering what outreach needs to be done so that this community and all communities have their voices heard at these meetings, so that we can progress with having in mind everybody's views and not just a few. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we took really seriously making sure we did outreach not just to the operators of paratransit, which we did do, but also the end users and some specific experts who'd been identified by our membership who had some detailed understanding of eligibility requirements, operational requirements, and hopefully did our best to reflect a good set of recommendations. As those recommendations are now out and open for comment, we definitely welcome any members of any community to come in and give those comments on how we can strengthen those recommendations. obviously, I think one of the key things I think we learned in doing those interviews and going through that process and doing that outreach is how non-standardized the experience might be on different sort of levels of paratransit service, as you highlighted. I will tell you, you talk to some operators, they will say, "Oh, we going beyond the 3/4 of a mile bus stop. It's just easier." And then you'll have this fact you just said. So I will say is it's extremely not a uniform experience, certainly across the state. And I think one of our key recommendations is how we can better focus on standardizing those sort of things so that the customer experience is cleaner and better across the state, and really delivers on the need, the topic area, which is like the needs of these riders rather than focusing it on the, sort of changes one could make, but really grounding it in those needs has been a key goal in making those recommendations. And so, yeah, those are open for comment. Welcome your feedback or really any members, as those are now kind of open on the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I'd like to see across the board changes in the way we look at services for the needs of the people, because our rural areas and even some of our city-based, it might as well be rural when it comes to the person not being able to get the service because they're outside that quota of mileage. And I think we really need to look at, who is this service meant for and who is it not meeting those needs. And so I appreciate that you're reaching out to those groups and things like that. I just think we can always do better. And that's always been my thinking on all of this. We can do better with our outreach. We can do better with not only the voices we hear, but making sure that they're a priority in everything we do. Thank you.
Great, thanks. We had member Wong and then member Martinez, and then I saw that Chair Gonzalez also raised her hand. So that's cute. Go ahead, Howard.
Okay, thanks. This is a very valuable presentation. I think it really is a good recap of the transit transformations work. I've, followed it a bit over the years, but this is a very, very nice to see all the summary in one place. So I think all of us are gonna take a look at those slides a little more carefully. The obviously since 2023, there's been already a lot of discussion. It'd be nice to have a little bit of a recap of some of the focus of our predecessors, since I'm new to the EAC, some of the comments and input by previous EAC committee members and subcommittee members to kind of get a grasp of the train of thought of the EAC of the past. The because of the financial stresses on many of our transit systems, transit transformation, even before this draft TTTF report is even introduced, many agencies and regions are already starting to try to implement and codify some of these principles, strategies, and guidelines. The San Francisco Bay Area, for instance, has been attempting to place a regional funding measure on the ballot in November of 2026. And within that measure, certain parts of the transit transformation goals are being introduced. And the reason for that is that transit, without some sense of improvements for everyone, for all Californians and all Bay Area residents, they will be very hesitant to vote for more funding. So it's already being discussed in many parts of the state. And one of the issues is that even in the Bay Area, which is rich in transit, the urban areas like San Francisco, Oakland, San Mateo, Alameda may have 20 to 25% transit mode share. But as a whole, the Bay Area as a whole, many of its suburbs have very little transit. So overall, the Bay Area has about 5% transit mode share. I would think that California as a whole probably has even a little bit less than 5%. So most people, for them, transit is very much out of reach. And that's why I like the emphasis of this report on having transit available to a wider part of the population. And a key way of phrasing it, I think, is that transportation being a very large part of the average household expenditure as part of their income, that we have in this report a goal that transit's transformation will reduce the overall transportation costs of a household year after year. Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate that, Member Long. And I should clarify, I know there was the earlier question on local engagement. The Bay Area has, through the MTC, has led their own, I don't want to say it's called the Transit Transformation Task Force. I think it has a slightly different name. I'm not as intimately familiar with that, but I think I think there's been an overall theme across all regions of recognizing how important transit is to our goals, whether that's the Bay Area's goals, Southern California's goals, or the state's goals, and then recognizing that the trend line has not been where we need it to be, and especially in a context of renewed investment in transit, proving out the importance of that and showing that value. I also think that was an excellent point. Chair Wong, and I know we say in the report, there are very few policy levers we have in government that can immediately put $10,000 in people's pockets. But for every household that we make it possible for them to live and access opportunity without a car, that's the equivalent of, it's about an average of $10,000 plus minus for owning a vehicle in California. So if somebody has access to opportunity, and that's one, jobs, but that's also healthcare, that's recreation, that's schools, that's childcare, that's shopping and retail, and doesn't need a car, that is an extra $10,000 a year if they're able to get by and have that opportunity to live without a car. So it's a real strong policy lever. I know we've said it in the report that it is a real important, it's the second largest expense for most Californians after housing and transit. Even transit that is not fare free is substantially orders of magnitude cheaper to get by with compared to owning and maintaining a motor vehicle.
All great points. I am going to shift now. We're going to shift to Member Martinez.
Okay. Well, Hunter, this has been a great presentation, and the scope and magnitude of just the state of California with 40 million people and 55 counties and rural and very rural and urban, and it's huge. So boy, not a small task. So one thing, let's see where to start. I think that anything that we say today should be considered a comment, because frankly, I don't want to have to make another comment about whatever it is I'm saying. So please consider what I'm saying as a public comment for whatever meeting it could be inserted into. I think that the idea that the paratransit portion is not a requirement is a big miss. And it should be one, and I hope that it becomes a requirement to, figure out what needs to happen for people who need paratransit. And I know that, this is such a big deal because, how much it costs to operate paratransit is huge. It's it's amazingly huge, the amount that it costs. And I think that we need to be really clear on it. You know, folks who use it, folks who I mean, I'm sure the operators are very clear, but for those of us who might need it, we have to be cognizant of the cost, because it's pretty prohibitive for a lot of, you know, in a lot of ways. So I just wanted to say that. Anyway, yeah, this is really interesting stuff. And you know, I certainly recognize that it's a set of recommendations. It doesn't have, I mean, the monetary considerations are not part of this. Or are they? Like, are you guys calculating?
Yeah, certainly funding needs and some of those, you know, how could we lower costs, especially in the paratransit area, but honestly across the board. The We are doing a lot to really try to address cost issues when it comes to delivering both fixed route and paratransit services. I know in the draft recommendations on paratransit topics that we are carrying forward, there are recommendations on how to reduce the cost of, you know, maintaining booking and dispatch systems by leveraging the state's buying power. That's just one particular one. So it is something that, and I think to your comment, you will hear very loudly and clearly from the operators about the cost of paratransit services and the need to, you know, try and deliver, you know, the importance of trying to deliver services as cost effectively as possible is a real, you know, challenge, to be frank. And I think we are looking to see like where can we make recommendations about how the state can really assist in lowering those costs so that you can deliver service more effectively. And I know I didn't want to interrupt, but it seemed like there was a pause there. So if there's anything else, Member
Yeah, there,
Martinez
just
can
a
please
couple more
continue.
things.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just a couple more things. I mean, just the sheeriest, I mean, okay. So what's happening for me is I'm hearing all the comments through my screen reader, so it can kind of distract me because I'm listening to all kinds of stuff going on. But yeah, I mean, the scope, the magnitude of the state is just so big. It's like, you know, several states combined, you know, and I think, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of transit. I'm a non-driver. I live in a rural community. And I want, you know, obviously I want things to be better, but I also think we have to remember how much transit costs. Granted, I'm not defending the lack of it. I'm just saying it's just part of the puzzle, and we as advocates have to kind of keep that in our keep that as part of this larger picture, that it's just the state is huge and we're covering a wide swath of concerns and areas and needs and this and that. So I think that's it. I'm going to read I'll you know, read your the slides, and I really appreciate it. And I'm hoping that you do find a good variety of folks with disabilities to give you guys good input. People, you know, with a variety of needs, because like any group, folks with disabilities have hugely variant requirements and needs. So I'm hoping that that is a consideration as you guys move forward. And yeah, thanks. I just look forward to continuing to learn more about what, you know, how how this is going to be implemented, or what's going to happen with this report. Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate the comments, and we'll definitely get those. We'll work with Allison to get those into the record and onto into the admin record on this one. Just to kind of the scope is challenging. I will say this as staff for this report, and I think it's been something we've been addressing. One thing that does sort of limit our scope is we really are trying to address recommendations that are important on transit to the legislature and administration for consideration. So really looking through the lens of like this not necessarily being the state's transit plan, which is its own effort, or you know any regional's particular transit plan or whatnot. or even a regional transit transformation effort, as was previously referenced, that Bay Area MTC one. We're really looking at what are the specific legislative, administrative, and funding changes that would be necessary to deliver transit transformation, thinking about like the state as a unit of governments. So that does help us limit that. But I'll hold and go back to the queue, I guess.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Peggy. We're gonna move on to Chair Gonzalez, and then Michelle, I saw your hand up. I think that's you're okay waiting for the end.
I did have my
Okay.
hand up also. I've been,
Yes, so we had Chair Gonzalez and Martha, you had actually, because you haven't spoken yet, Chair, do you mind if I let Martha go ahead of you?
Yes, I don't mind going last. That's
Okay, then we'll go then to you after Martha's comments, and then back to Michelle.
well, thank you. Although I appreciate the report. I appreciate all the work and effort that was put into it. But again, it's a mess. I mean, when we don't have intentional strategies lined up with the real needs of what we're trying to create, then we kind of create like a super bill or a super project or proposal that unfortunately, when it gets sifted through the eye or lens, the economic lens, the community always falls short. And I hear some of the things that you're considering, but to me, it's like smoke and mirrors. You know, we really want to know where we're going to be effective at, and this subcommittee, I'm failing to see the connections as far as what we can attain once it's already been done and written and proposed. So we're kind of coming in as an after fact. And so I'd like to see where, if you could explain to us where this subcommittee would really create some type of tangible inference or outcome towards anything of a sustainability for the community.
Yeah, and just to kind of, I know we've had overall some engagement with the EAC just as the process has been baking, and as mentioned, we've had engagement from the community and been working with, we've had EAC members in the TWG as mentioned. At the particular point we are in the process, which is this sort of legislatively driven timeline, we are really looking for feedback and recommendations on these tranches of the report. And so tranche one is kind of where we really need input. And that I do mean TTTF input, but I also mean, input from the community and from the EAC. So that is, and sort of wanted to orient everyone with this presentation, but where we are right now is really getting that detailed input on each of the tranches, and I've appreciated all the feedback we've gotten today, and we'll aim to incorporate that into the report to the extent possible.
I like the way you say it. You're saying that, but I mean, like, this is the kind of like the convex. You ask a question, and I'm not saying you in general, just I mean you as a person, but more in general, we're asked a question, we give the feedback. How are we able to see? And maybe this is where the crux is, because when you mentioned you've conferred with the EAC, I think it'd be really important to to kind of support that these recommendations were vetted by the EAC, so that we'd be able to see those outcomes rather than kind of shooting in the dark and expecting something to come back. And then when it doesn't come back, how do we ensure that those considerations are upheld or even valued in a tangible manner? That's kind of like what I'm asking. And it's not just you, it's metaphoric, because this is where a lot of the questions come for community. When we are sitting in the sessions and we give the information, how can we ensure, or is there a way or a measure or some type of medium that we could use to really show EAC had this contribution and this was the recommendation that they gave. EAC was present at this and this, because to just say we are EAC, I feel kind of that it would be very easy to tokenize our role versus really using our input as outcomes.
Yeah, again, we will do our best to incorporate all feedback. I don't think we do not have in the TTTF sort of a specific, making it attributable to any particular, member or organization or comment letter we've received. Again, the goal is to synthesize what we've received feedback from everybody. I'll defer on some of the EAC role questions to my colleagues.
Yeah, and I would just say, Member Armis Kelly, I think your point is really well taken and resonates with this group. Because we are in what I would call a space with this group, with this committee, with this cohort of committee members, group of committee members, and people who are not on this call, and thinking in a vision that this group is much more active in how they're engaged and involved in some of the things that are brought before them. We're also working with a task force whose structure is set up somewhat differently, who is still prioritizing lots of input and technical discussions and engagement with lots of stakeholders and careholders throughout the state, trying to not, they're not. And I think that there's a space for this subcommittee and the EAC to continue to inform the recommendations, the final recommendations. And I think that's why we're bringing this forward now in June. We were hoping to do it just after that first meeting on the 10th, but actually this is another opportunity to consider what's being brought before this task force in future meetings later this summer, and to consider where and hearing comments now. I mean, I think to Peggy's point, where she's making her comments now, and taking that and thinking through it. So let's keep thinking about how to best convey this committee and the subcommittee's concerns and raising them. I think we definitely have done that. We have a couple more to go too, so I want to make sure we have everyone else. So I just want to give Hunter a little bit of space to work through things with his task force. And then also make sure that he's aware that we're very interested in being involved in some way and trying to figure out how that plays out. And it might be in the refinement of the recommendations. It could be down the line as we need to think about implementation, which is even more important on the ground. So anyway, I wanted to see, we dropped, Chair Gonzalez, did you want to comment? Your hand went down and you were.
I was gonna allow Michelle to go next and then
Okay.
I go last.
That's fine. Michelle. Thank you. Thanks for tag teaming with me on this.
Thank you. Again, thanks for the presentation. I do have concerns. Because, last year, one of the subcommittees worked on the California needs assessment for transportation. And where I have concerns is the accessible transportation portion was lacking in graphs and other documentation where the other areas of transportation had in the documents. And we're not due to have that needs assessment done for another 5 years. And I'm wondering if that's something that would be a useful tool for you guys to like, given an example of where we want that information and we want that included in your documentation, the needs of accessible transportation user and the transportation itself. And if you guys need help getting that information from the providers, then please reach out, because the individual counties and entities has that information and are doing their own needs assessment. So that information is actually available. I want to show concerns where other members have in the paratransit, and those not being part of the document is permanent, and would hope that would change. Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks.
it, and thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. I'm going to go to I think Peggy, then Howard, and then Anna, maybe we'll, if you put your hand back up, I'll, why don't we, let me know if you want to close out. Maybe that's the way to do it. If that's okay. Peggy?
My hand was mistakenly raised. I just lowered it.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. And
Yep.
we'll go to Howard, then Anna.
The issue of governance has been very hotly discussed in the San Francisco Bay Area. The Bay Area has 27 transit agencies, and part of it's the Metropolitan Transportation Commission's focus, which includes Bay Area elected officials, transit agencies, transit advocates, has been to develop a structure where there's a regional transit oversight. Instead of 27 agencies, there might be 1 or 2 or 3. And this model, of course, has been very successful throughout the world. Many cities that have very good transit systems have regional coordination. You know, think of Hong Kong, Zurich, Paris, New York City. So inside of the November 2026 ballot measure, there was an attempt to include some more structure, legal structure to creating this coordination, because coordinated transit in a region is very much more cost effective. It reduces costs, overlapping scheduling, operations, maintenance, administration, purchasing, and it's best practices seen in many parts of the world. As Michelle mentioned, on this last 2 days in San Francisco, there was a regional conference on accessibility. And the attempt was to bring together the accessible community to craft a strategy of more paratransit and accessibility for disabled and seniors. And one of the core discussions was regional paratransit, so that instead of 27 or even more paratransit type services throughout the Bay Area, there would be a single regional paratransit system, which could even tap technology and new mobility modes. So governance, regional coordination, and integration is very important to many people. It's very politically divisive, and many transit agencies and cities and counties have their own particular interests, and it's very difficult to gather people together to create this very much more cost-effective coordinated system that we see in other parts of the world. Thank you.
Appreciate the comments, and just to address, service and fair coordination is one of the topics that will be addressed in the final report.
Then finally, Chair Gonzalez.
Yes, thank you so much again. I want to uplift and ditto all the comments from our colleagues. They're very important. As I'm reading the statute, also, I'm seeing that there's an accountability program for the distribution of funds, which includes almost a quarter of the funds to go to zero emission transit capital programs. And particularly in my area, San Bernardino and Riverside counties, we're seeing an explosion of continuance of funding diesel, CNG, and hydrogen transit, opportunities. And so my question to that is, are we prioritizing zero emissions by statute, or is that kind of like a wish list item for the task force?
So statute, as I had referenced in the opening part of my remarks, kind of does two separate things, one of which is establish the task force that has to write the report, which is where my area of expertise is. The other is establish two more formula-based funding programs, the second of which is the one you mentioned, the Zero Emission Transit Capital Program. It's up to the discretion of the RTPAs in the region how those funds are expended, with some accountability guidelines that CalSTA has published. I am not personally the expert on those, so I think Allison and I can take an action if there are any specific questions about how that funding is being used to get that from the relevant party, because I do not know off the top of my head.
No, that's okay. Maybe we can have a sidebar after this and we can go in depth later. Thank you.
Super helpful and really thoughtful conversation on all of this. So really appreciate and wanted to just see if there was any other comments from those who may have not had a chance to speak, who may be off mute. Okay. But I really appreciate the conversation. There are some reminders to, if there are any verbal comments that you might have made in the chat, to if those of you who had any comments didn't make them, to just say them on the Zoom for the record. The chat is not really intended to be our public comment space. Michelle, is that your hand raised?
Yeah, I went ahead and did that, just so you're aware, but thank you.
Yeah, just a reminder, we're trying to, our Zoom etiquette is easy to chat, but also something that we want to be really aware of for public access. So we'll keep that in mind. I think with that, I wanted to remind this subcommittee that we are having, that the Transit Transformation Task Force will be meeting for the remainder of the summer. We'll continue to keep you posted on dates and materials as reminders of this effort. And then as there are questions, I'm happy to, we'll have Hunter send his comments, or sorry, his contact information along, so you can reach out directly to him, and we will provide that to the group after the fact. Michelle, your hand's up.
Yeah, I know it's up. I just would like for the EAC and or any other group to possibly reach out to MCC. And there's a lot of interested disability and senior people out there that over the last few days we had that conference, but that they're interested in our group. So if we could pass that information along to NCC so they could pass it to the people who want and need that information, possibly future members of the group, for not only the EAC, but other groups that you might, that need members. And it's a good way to do outreach to let that community know about our group and or potential being members here. Thank you.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you. Okay. We'll also won't be strangers, and we will see if there's ways we can bring updates back to this subcommittee. Hopefully a little bit more focused discussions and some follow-ups based on the activities this summer and fall. It may be, I know Hunter has a lot on his plate, so we're going to try to figure out how to do this thoughtfully to make the best use of our time. With that, thank you very much, and we'll wrap up our item. Thanks all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hunter.
Allison, and thank you, Hunter, for taking the time to present. Really appreciate that. Thank you to the members for such a thoughtful discussion. With that, we'll now move on to closing and next steps. So we'll make sure the minutes from this meeting are available, and we'll work with Anna for a report out of this discussion and, you know, any next steps and information with the Transit Transformation Task Force. So while we have everybody here, we just want to think about scheduling for our next meeting in August. So just kind of like a tentative idea of days to avoid or suggestions. for best days to meet. I know some people have like standing meetings on a certain day of the week, so we'll try our best to schedule around those if anybody has scheduling considerations. David?
Well, I'm gonna be away the latter half of August, so
Okay.
I'll send you
Oh,
an email.
sorry, Howard. Yeah, you're away the
I'll,
latter half of August.
yeah, I'll send an email.
Okay. David?
Yes, so I'm not sure if this applies to other folks, but the legislature comes back from summer recess, mid-August, and I'm trying to find the exact date. If I had to guess, it's probably the 11th or the 18th. If someone can check me on that. But that is when my busy season starts. It will be harder to schedule things just personally for there. But that seems to match up with at least what Howard's saying, in the sense of the back half of August.
This is Peggy. I'll be out the week of August 4th and the week of August 18th.
The 4th and the 18th. Okay, thank you. Michelle?
Can can you just send me a Google invite with some dates and I'll see if I can fit them in. That's probably the easiest way. I normally have the first Tuesday every other month and after 4 on the second Tuesdays that are full every month.
Okay, thanks. Carrie, I saw your comment in the chat that you're not available the third Wednesday of every
Thank you,
month.
Camille.
Yeah. And then Peggy, I see your hand up. Did you have any other scheduling considerations? No. Okay. Thank you so much for that, and we'll compile that and send out a doodle poll in the next few weeks with some possible date options to meet. Before we adjourn our meeting, is there anything else? Awesome. Well, congrats again, Anna, for being elected chair. Oh, Peggy?
Yep, real quick. I want to thank you guys. This is kind of hard work to get everybody together and to do all this. And so yeah, thank you, Steph. And anyway, you know what? This is a work in progress. And I'm really glad we got to hear this transformation, whatever it was called. I don't remember the report. It was great. So I don't know. This is just huge. All of this stuff is so big. But thank you. That's all I guess I really wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Peggy. Appreciate that. If there's nothing else, we can now adjourn this meeting at 11:25 a.m. Thank you so much, everybody, and we'll follow up with next steps.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks all.